Dr. Joy, before we move on, because you kind of went from Eden and then we're kind of in the Noah times where that is, but one of the things that I found the most interesting, the absolutely most interesting thing in the very beginning of the book was Enoch.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's just really, really cool. Also, we have a question. Does anyone know where Cain's wife came from?
Interesting enough, I've been doing a lot of research on that particular issue in itself, because I feel like that the Bible is everything in there is there. It's just that we have got to have the understanding and be able to get to the point that we can pull it out of there. My belief, and this is just something that I'm working on right now, is that in chapter 1, it specifically gives information in Genesis that that God actually made man, a male and female, in his image. It does not mention at that point in time that there was a Lord God that put a breath or a nesma into the body and called it an Adam. And I believe that there was something like a, I guess you could say like a pre-Adam, maybe that's mentioned in chapter 1, that would have given way to a male and female. But it was not until chapter 2 that there is a forming of man from the ground, in which the Lord God, if you'll notice in chapter 1 it says God, in chapter 2 it says Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And from that point in time, I feel like that there was something different about Adam compared to the first Adam, or the first male and female, which are not named. So I had always had that question as a child too, and I used to ask it all the time in Sunday school, who married Cain and who was his wife? And of course I've heard, the stories of the possibility that Cain married his sister, that Adam and Eve had other children. And my concern is, because I worked with handicapped people for 13 years, that if you marry a male and a female from exactly the same lineage, then you could have a problem, unless Cain was definitely from Satan, as I have mentioned earlier, and that he was not really anything but would be a half-brother to his sister. There's a possibility that could have happened as well. But I do find interesting that chapter 1 does mention a male and female, and there's nothing named like there is in chapter 2. So it could be either or.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's move on to the Enoch lines, because that was really fascinating.
Well, I think that the thing that I had always heard was, the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is always being brought up, especially like now you're seeing it on the Discovery Channel. They just found the Book of Enoch and that kind of thing. And that was interesting to me, because when I looked at the Cain lineage, and then I looked at the lineage of Seth, there were actually 2 Enochs. And the one that God took was actually the one that was from the lineage of Seth. But the second to Cain was Enoch, and that's the one that went out and built the cities. And so the book of Enoch, I feel, is the builder Enoch, not the person that God took, that walked with God. There's a lot of difference in between the two parallelizations of the two, because one being from Seth's lineage, he would have been the 7th from Adam. And it talks about what I feel like really happened to him was that he was actually translated. In other words, he was quickened, or in kind of a form of rapture, because he just never died. He went right up, and all the other ones had the dates that they lived and the dates that they died, and of course that Enoch did not. But the interesting thing about the book of Enoch is that it talks about the fallen angels, and it absolutely describes him as assuming human form and having relationships with women. And I think this is where we talk about in Genesis 6, where the sons of God come upon the daughters of man and they start having children. The book of Enoch really tells this in great detail, and then it goes into the different types of fallen angels, that there were different levels of fallen angels. And so this makes sense as to why some of the angels were put into hell and some still remain with Satan, or able to tempt and continued on past the flood and having relationships with what I believe was Ham's lineage, because we see that there were remnants of those giants still alive, because David, before he became King David, he actually slew Goliath, and we know that Goliath was a giant. So there was some way that the remnant actually came through the flood, and we know that the only people who came through the flood, according to the Bible, were Noah, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives, and then Noah's wife. And there's a lot of, I go into great detail about Noah and how some of the Masonic texts that have survived try to say that Noah had a wife, and his wife was the daughter of a pharaoh, and that his wife actually was pregnant with Ham, and that Ham was not Noah's son. That's one type of part of the question that you have as to how the lineage, the Canaanite lineage, got through the flood. The other is that, in my opinion, it never tells you that really who Ham's mother was. It says that Noah and his wife, but it never says that his wife is the mother of Ham and Shem and Japheth. Now, we do know from the Bible that Shem and Japheth were brothers, because it calls Japheth the elder of Shem. But Ham does not seem to be biologically connected through the mother to Shem and Japheth. So I have a question in my mind through my research, is that when Ham went in upon Noah, when it talks about he found his father in a drunken state and he uncovered his nakedness, if you look on into the other chapters of Leviticus, you find that when you uncover nakedness, it's involved with having sexual relationships with your mother or with your father's wife and that kind of thing. So I've got a question in my mind that Noah's wife may not have been the mother of Ham. We know that Ham was the youngest son, and the Bible does say that Noah begat all 3 of those. So if Noah was the father, then my question is, who was Noah's wife? We don't have a name, but I don't believe it was actually Ham's mother. And I know that whatever Ham did, Noah cursed Ham's first son, Canaan. And that's through the lineage where the Canaanites came back, and that is the people who got involved back again with the fallen angels, and where the remnants of these giants resurfaced back on earth. So you see it coming through the flood and continuing on with these remnants, and all these giants and the people that were involved with the Cain lineage were actually cursed. And they, throughout the Bible, it was always that the Jehovah would tell Moses and the Israelites never to have relationships with this group of people. So there was something very taboo about being involved with those people and their gods and what was going on. So I feel like that is how, something happened there to bring the information that had been before the flood. And the most interesting thing that was before the flood, like we were talking about, was knowledge and some great building capabilities. Well, when Ham came down from Ariad, I believe that he found accessibility to some of the records that were left from before the flood. And because he was involved with the evil side of the Canaanite lineage, or the Cain lineage before the flood, that he picked back up on that information. He was already cursed. He became the cursed son. It's almost kind of parallel to God, saying, to Cain, this is not going to work, what you've done to your brother. And so I think that Noah kind of did that to Ham's lineage, that, we're not going to put up with the sin, and so he cast him out.